I'd like to go to the Plumbing and Drainage Act and Water Supply Act. And my question is to the LGAQ. And we might be going back to some of the things that you were speaking about before, Greg, and then I'd like to ask a follow-up question to the Master Plumbers. So obviously we're talking about the requirement that water meters be performed by a licensed plumber, and the submission from Queensland Water supports this amendment but suggests that the installation of water meters by water service providers would not result to an increased risk to public health. Your submission took a different view. Would you like to explain on Queensland Water's observation?
I don't believe we are at difference here. Our argument, both QLD Water and ours, is that the argument that there is some systemic endemic failure of water quality and the like as a consequence of the work done by authorised officers does not have evidence to support it, to the extent that the change has to be made to it, removing the flexibility that either a plumber or an authorised officer can do the work. Claims have been made that this is the case, but neither of us have seen anything definitive, nor to suggest that it is such a problem that a sole skill set is required or provided. And as I've indicated, the consequence of that poses some significant costs and delays for people in localities where plumbers do not exist, and those figures are 2015 figures. So that's the issue we have. We don't see the need. Where's the evidence to support it? And if the change is made, then the consequence will be significant costs to people in certain places.
I may come back to that a bit further because there are some other questions. Can I just ask the Master Plumbers though, you were talking about instances of cross-contamination of which the government would be aware, just for the benefit of the community. Could you please outline what those incidents were?
Penny Corner from the Master Plumbers Association. We were referring to a number of cross connections. One specifically was down at the Pimpamacoomera area, and also on the tunnel, the Brisbane Airport tunnel as well, that was being built there. So if you'd like, we can provide further information on that.
Really helpful, thank you. And if you could actually elaborate that on whether they were a result of work being carried out by non-licensed.
Yes, we believe that they were, and I believe there was about 30 people who were unwell and had to go to hospital from that.
And I just asked the Plumbers Union, would you like to comment on that or provide us with some information after the...
We could provide information, if you like. Yeah. I'll hand to Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Palmer-Bright from the Plumbers Union Queensland. So we have some information that we provided in our submission when this was last considered by Parliament. So the cross-connection event at the Pimpama Wastewater Treatment Plant happened in December 2009, which resulted in recycled water being delivered through potable water supplies to over 630 homes. Residents were unable to drink tap water for 4 days over the weekend, and the matter has been investigated by both Queensland Health and the former Plumbing Industry Council. We've also had, in 2010, Gold Coast Water recorded at least 8 cases of cross-connections in the Pimpama-Coomera area, which were due to various incorrect water meter installations. 5 of these were undertaken by unlicensed individuals, and the other 3, Gold Coast Water wasn't aware of who performed the installations. There was a previous cross-connection incident at the plant itself, which also exposed 375 people to lower quality recycled water for 9 weeks during 2008. And investigations by Queensland Health found that 73 of those exposed had suffered illnesses related to their exposure.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to add anything else, with this moment,
Yeah, thank you. Just going on with that, you were completing your answer in relation to some of those incidents. The first one and the last one, though, IDing who was responsible. The first one, 630 households or something.
The incident that affected the residential area, that 5 of the cross connections that were identified were performed by unlicensed people, and 3 they didn't know who
Sorry, there was
performed
one
them.
before that.
The incident before that happened at the plant, so it wasn't performed by a licensed person.
Okay, so they don't have licensed people at plants.
No,
like
because
that.
they're not performing plumbing work at the plant. It was a cross connection on the plant facilities.
Oh, so it wasn't a plumbing issue.
I don't have enough information about that here. We'd have to get more information.
Could we get more information on that? Because it's important when giving evidence to not to be very clear, to not put forward issues such as this one, where in fact just a further question reveals that in fact it was unlikely to have been a plumber because they don't have plumbers on site and so forth.
We include this information just as evidence of how important it is to have properly licensed people working on these type of installations.
Yeah, but I take your point there, but you've included it as evidence as to the need for a licensed plumber, and yet that major incident that you talk about there had nothing to do with plumbers or other than someone other than a plumber fitting water meters. It was something that happened inside a plant. So we can yeah, sure, Brad.
Brad O'Carroll, State Secretary of the Plumbers Union. In relation to that matter, I think the point is that when non-licensed people were working with the water supply, and to my knowledge that was a utility building within a plant, you ended up having staff and office staff actually drinking the water that was from the treatment plant.
Okay.
The point is that no one should be touching any of the water supply unless they are qualified and are formally qualified in a way that they are licensed plumbers.
Okay, so does this legislation address that issue?
Yes.
In recycled plants?
In treatment plants?
In treatment
Yes. No one should work on the water supply unless they are licensed plumbers.
Okay. That incident occurred before the legislation that changed the laws. Were they in breach of the law in employing non-licensed people at that plant?
We certainly believe so. The issue is that councils and water providers for many years previous have pretty well had their own interpretations of the Act, and it's been in dispute all the way through. The previous government's way of fixing that was to pass legislation that allowed the water suppliers to do pretty well whatever they wanted. This Act changes it to bring it back to what it should always have been, and that is that fully qualified licensed plumbers are the only people that work on water supply. Our water supply and the way we treat our drinking water and our sewage separates us from the third world. It is our most valuable resource. All these arguments about not having plumbers, well, let's get those regional communities into apprenticeships that train them properly so their water supplies are protected the same as ours are.
Okay, thanks. So just the final point that you made, the final example that you gave, you weren't clear as to whether or not it was plumbers or other than plumbers that. The final one, 100 and something people, I think it was.
Elizabeth Palmer-Bright, Plumbers Union. We would have to confirm that information with the Queensland Building and Construction Commission.
Yeah, and if I can just, Chair, just it was all sort of related to what I was going to ask, but then that information came forward. Back in February 2014, Mark McCardle, at the time, in introducing the bill, makes a statement, and I just want to gauge, views, because you hit on it right then, properly trained. The bill amends the Plumbing and Drainage Act 2002 to clarify that authorised persons can be appointed by a service provider to install water meters on the service provider's infrastructure, in addition to licensed plumbers. These authorised persons will need to have appropriate training or expertise and must be competent to undertake the work safely and mitigate risks to the public health. Now, my question out of what we're talking about here is, can the union and can you, Penny, see a possibility that someone can be really well trained in that specific role of, but not be a plumber, in that specific role of putting a water meter in place, as is currently the legislation? Could they be so well trained, but just in that role, as opposed to being a plumber doing all of those other myriad things that plumbers do, which are, you know, amazing? Yeah. So.
Well, my answer is no.
You don't believe they can?
No, they need to be licensed plumbers, and they need to be trained to a Cert 3 level that gives them a full career path. The people that are there existing in the workforce, we are happy to work with to actually give them a qualification that does it, but it is far from an acceptable line from the state to continue going on in the way that things have been going.